So we'll talk a little bit about socialism. What is that and why it is based on cronyism? Well, John Locke, I would say, for me, the greatest British philosopher, and he believed that you should answer the question, who owns you? Who owns you? And if you own yourself, you're a free man. If somebody else owns you, you're a slave. So if that case, it kind of embraces everything. It embraces private slavery and public slavery as well. And public slavery is socialism. Socialism is when you don't own yourself. The government owns you. The government is telling you what to do and where to live, where to work, when to die. That's what all is in the central planning, And so in 1986, I joined Mr. Gorbaczov's economic reform crowd. That was a senior group of economists, and I was in charge of reform of civil service, and which was uncivil disservice in the Soviet Union. But I immediately, when I joined it, we had our first meeting with Mr. Gorbachev. It was maybe about 20-25 people in the audience, and Mr. Gorbachev, he said, we need to keep in mind that central planning works. Central planning works. The problem is that we never had a good plan. and I was sitting next to his chief economic advisor, Mr. Aganbegyan, and we called him the biggest economist in the world. He was even bigger than me, and he bent to me and he said, Yuri, do you think there is anything behind this beautiful birthmark? If you remember Mr. Gorbachev. And I was thinking these are real changes because under Stalin, if you would say anything like that, you would be dead. So this is public slavery, and it is public slavery. Now Marx, they're still teaching Marx everywhere. In 3,000 something colleges, they have real courses on Marxism, on Marxist economics, Marxist sociology. They had a World Marxist College at a very appropriate place, Amherst, Massachusetts, and I remember they had this resolution passed. So in Moscow, you cannot have a Marxist Congress anymore. You would be probably, I don't know, ostracized by people. But in Amherst, Massachusetts, they adopted a resolution that what happened in Soviet Union and other socialist countries was not actually the collapse of socialism. It was collapse of state capitalism. State capitalism sounds like an oxymoron for me, but collapse of state. So capitalism failed again, and this time ruined Soviet Union. And you can see that just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, all the left celebrated 200th anniversary since Marx's birth. And there was this articles in New York Times, Washington Post, and all others that about Marx, how great he was, how he was misunderstood, that we cannot blame him for murders at all, that he was not complicit in these murders. I will show you a little bit later that he was. Many of my colleagues would say, well, this is communism is bad. Fascism is bad, but socialism is good. Socialism is good. Socialism is being blamed for. It's communism which is bad. Well, communism never happened. If you will look what communism is, communism sounds like a libertarian utopia. The state would wither away. There will be no state. Then there will be no money, no nothing, no Federal Reserve, definitely. And people would work for free, and working for free would be the greatest delight, according to Marx, which will dwarf all the pleasures of love. So we would don't need probably to multiply, just go to work. And then after work, we can go to these huge public warehouses, would be like Sam's Clubs or Costco, but with no cashiers. So you can pick whatever you like to pick, and you will work as hard as you possibly can, but you will consume as little as you possibly can. You will be such an angel that the state would wither away because you don't need to be governed. You will self-govern yourself. And because, and Lenin, a student of Marx, he was kind of thinking that maybe will not happen right away. And, and Lenin made the point that, and it's written, that we inherited from Tsars, we inherited very poor human material. That's how he called people. Very poor human material, which can be enhanced only by mass shootings and forced labor. But when why there was no communism? Friedrich Engels, the guy who bankrolled Marx and was the co-author of many works with Marx, he asked Marx, when does he think this communist utopia, this communist paradise would occur? And Marx said, I think maybe 400 or 500 years from now. So we still are maybe 150 years on the wait list before it would happen. In Poland, I was at the World Libertarian Congress, sitting next to a British lady, and she said, I was a Politburo member of the British Communist Party. And I said, what are you doing at the Libertarian Congress? She said, I turned libertarian. I said, what's that for? And she said, because she believes that libertarian, free markets, whatever, they would make capitalism ripe faster. So maybe we can cut 150 years to only 75. If everything will be libertarian, then capitalism would be ripe again and communist revolution can occur before that. So delusions, you never know what the forms and shapes of delusions are. At least it's funny. Yes, Marx himself, classes and the races, too weak to master the new conditions of life, must give away. Then, theory of communism. What is socialism? Socialism is abolition of private property. So when Bernie Sanders is saying Denmark is the best socialist country, this is stupid because Denmark is not a socialist country. And Jan Rasmussen, the Prime Minister of Denmark, he even, next day after Bernie Sanders made this statement, he made a statement on Danish TV that he's bad-mouthing Denmark. Because if you go to Denmark, you will see that it's a capitalist country. You can have this or that so-called neo-socialist kind of programs and welfare state. But the basis of the economy is private property. And besides that, in most countries, including Scandinavian countries, they have much less regulations than in the United States. It's freer. You can, for example, in Sweden, we are struggling with the school choice issue. So no, in Sweden, anyone can open, except certified pedophiles, but anybody else can open a school. If you have a higher education, you can open a school, and they have a lot of schools, Jewish schools and Muslim schools and Catholic schools and Lutheran schools and whatever else. And then, and that would be the choices, much more choices. Now they're trying to get rid of their version of Obamacare, of their healthcare. Right now, even in Canada, they're privatizing the laboratories and things like that, the auxiliaries for serving the, say, state hospitals or whatnot. We have I think that's one of the most important things to keep in mind, that to keep government out of our bodies. We created this monster with a third-party payee system, and now they want to take over it, and I think that would be already the first sign of complete slavery, when you would not own your body, and that's extremely important for us, but Obamacare is still alive. So there are a lot of different mass murderers of any kind. One of them, Zinoviev, in 1936, he was murdered by Stalin. He probably made him laugh. And said we must carry along with us 90 million out of the 100 million of Soviet Russia's population. As for the rest, we have nothing to say to them. They must be annihilated. And that kind of monsters, and Lenin and Stalin, they were all talking about that. So this is the stuff which not many people know. There is some kind of confusion about relations between Hitler and Marxism. Hitler several times, he referred to Marxism as the source of his wisdom, Then many people saying, well, Marx was Jewish. Marx was not Jewish. He was the son of a lawyer who baptized himself in Lutheran faith 5 years before Marx was born. And I hate to say that, but many people like that, they would be even more anti-Semitic because they willfully rejected their roots. So that means that he hated to be Jewish, so he became Lutheran. And this is, I don't want to read it because that's, that's how they can fire me from my college. And yes, it's talking about racial trash all the time. Marx was, and who would be racial trash? Basques, Scottish Islanders, Slavs, especially Poles and Serbs. They should be burned in the revolutionary Holocaust. So, and he had a great student in Hitler and student in Lenin. Yes, so speaking about how peaceful was Marx, we have no compassion and we ask no compassion from you. When our turn comes, we shall not make excuses for the terror. And you should keep in mind that if this is democratic socialism, this is an oxymoron. There is no such thing. Then that when, for example, we will have a takeover in our country, and this takeover is going on, I think, right now. I think we have I wanted to say slow motion socialist revolution. I think it's not slow motion anymore. It's almost a full blown. And that's why I ignore even shortcomings and misgivings of our president, because he is definitely on the side of the whites. You remember that in Russia they had whites and reds. And whites were everybody else. They were people who didn't want slavery. And there were different groups of people who maybe didn't have much in common, whatever. And that's a pity that they lost, and they were beautiful losers. But I think that we made an unexpected, because I was already thinking where to defect again before those last elections. Then Mao Zedong will talk about numbers. In Soviet Union, the numbers are anywhere from 43 to 61 million people murdered. 43 million number was even confirmed by the KGB itself. I remember when Gorbachev, he had collateral to his perestroika. Perestroika was restructuring. And Gorbachev, he was kind of, he didn't know what's happening or whatever. I don't know whether he did things deliberately, because he would say, for example, the same Abel Aganbegyan would say, we need to build a Swedish model. And Gorbachev would say, where you would get Swedes? And so sometimes he had something funny to say, but from another hand, it was not going anywhere. And I just was published several articles about Alexander Yakovlev, who was his second man. He was previously Soviet ambassador to Canada. And he was a real enemy of everything. Since 1944, he served in the Soviet army, decided that that regime is the most evil, this evil incarnate. It's worse than anything. These are antichrists and whatever. And I remember he once said, a friend of mine, he said, Alexander, what do you think about restructuring? How we should restructure? And he said we should restructure this monstrosity into rubble. into pile of rubble. So he knew what he was doing, and that's exactly monstrosity it was. Like 43, 61 million. I even don't care whether it's 43, 61. It's all above my understanding of evil even. That's the mass murder, and Stalin was. He looked, and that's. Why did I put this here? Because many people in first Soviet government were the most educated people of their time. They were the most educated people of their time. Lenin could speak 7 languages. Trotsky would write poetry in French. But because of their goal, because of their ideology, it made them the gang of the most prolific murderers the history ever knew. Because under Stalin and Mao Zedong, more people were murdered than by anybody else. All others, Genghis Khan and Hitler and whomever else combined, couldn't reach these numbers. Well, Stalin was saying, death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem. The death of one man is a tragedy. The death of millions is statistic, nothing else. And so, or I am working at the Library of Congress at the archives of the former Soviet general Volkogonov, and this is just horrible, horrific. He was commander of Soviet Institute for Military History, and amazingly, and he was a propaganda person. He was worse than, I think, Keith Olbermann or what's Miss Maddow, or maybe not, but every time he would be on TV, I would switch him off because he was just lying and lying and lying. And he was commander of Soviet Institute for Military History and member of the Central Committee and everything. And I would never imagine that the same very person, he was in Austria in 1981 and bought a Xerox machine, and he was making highly illegal copies of everything going through his desk. And he accumulated 46 big boxes of super secret materials from times of Lenin to Gorbachev. And then when Soviet Union collapsed, he became National Security Advisor to Mr. Yeltsin. And he approached US ambassador in Moscow, and he asked an assistance to move all these archives to United States, to Library of Congress. And the ambassador said, well, how about CIA? CIA can help you. He said, no, CIA, I want to Library of Congress, and if CIA wants to read it, get a reader's card and read it in the Library of Congress. And I don't know if CIA ever did that. I did, and unfortunately, I'm the only reader, looks like it's in the archives, in a special kind of keeping part of it, and nobody else is. But there is enough material of these crimes and murders and lies, enough for 10, 15,000 doctorate dissertations. It's just amazing thing there. And just to give you a kind of a feel what it's all about, there is a commissar from South Russia writing to Lenin, dear comrade Lenin, you told us to fight religion. You didn't explain how. Lenin is writing him back, dear comrade imbecile, kill religious people, that's how. Lenin, and then postscript, and kill them the way everybody would be trembling with fear 150 miles around. So this is the kind of, and why they kill? It's inevitable under socialism. That's what we should keep in mind. Inevitable. Murder and socialism are interconnected because under socialism there is absolutely no incentives to do anything. If you would be paid the same, no matter what you do or you don't, if you will live in the same barracks, if you would have the same access to non-existent health care or education, which would be as bad or even worse than brainwashing in our, say, public schools, then after that, you will not do anything. You'll just sit around or drink like Russians do, or do something else like this. The only way to make you do what the great leader wants is to threaten you, to kill. And this is, so the murder and violence under socialism is part of the economic mechanism. It's inevitable. Otherwise it would collapse. So these are the... and why revolutions should be violent? Because if it's abolition of private property, people usually do not give private property without struggle. They would not say, oh, please take me, take everything, I will leave. So this is it's from Lenin, yeah. The dictatorship of the proletariat will follow to weed out remaining capitalist elements. And so they were weeding this, and Keynes and others. We had so many people who either misunderstood what's going on, or were, whether were useful idiots for socialism or useless idiots, because that's what Lenin was saying, that they're useful idiots, that will be liberals, or whomever. Useless idiots would be actually socialist anarchists. Now we have a very funny thing, that there are some libertarians are saying, we are socialist libertarians. This is the worst oxymoron. Yeah, somebody put a wonderful picture on this, and yes, and I am a banana octopus. And that's and that's exactly what it is. Yeah. So you can see that Keynes loved it. Keynes was loved by Hitler, by another socialist, National Socialist. He was invited to Berchtesgaden. Well, he had, he was wise enough not to go, saying that he's sick. So Hayek, I think, he spent a lot of, and von Mises spent a lot of the energy and effort to present socialism in what it really is. It's misplaced. Socialism, unfortunately, has a pretty kind of good marketing strategy, especially to the young people. And what is I think that if you are 20 and you are not a socialist, you don't have a heart. If you are 30 and still a socialist, you don't have a brain. But 20 years old, they really like it. So we will. I see that my time is coming up. This is wrong Hayek. This is a real Hayek, and this is von Mises. And von Mises, he wrote about this National Socialism and Marxist socialism. Russian pattern, everything is owned by the state, and German pattern is when it's like United States economy today, moving there. That you have a title, but you're actually not in charge. The government is telling you what to do, when to open, when to close, whom to fire, and whom to hire. Okay, I will maybe stop on this. The funny thing about this pension, of Truman's pension that was mentioned before, when Gorbachev was fired as the president of Soviet Union because of no Soviet Union, Yeltsin ordered the parliament to give him a pension, and the parliament passed $6 a month pension to Mr. Gorbachev. And when Yeltsin was signing it, he said, "You're wasting government resources again." And I think he was right. Any kind of socialism is dangerous. All right. Well, thank you. I will leave it.